university professor here at TUE, and he's also editor of the Philosophical Explorations. Is that correct? That's a journal, and it's a special journal. He'll do. He'll talk about his experiences in the publishing field in that sense. And on the other sofa we'll have Marijtje Jongsma. She's the chair of VAWO. That's the Union of Academics in the Netherlands, and she's also at the Radboud University in Nijmegen. Please take a seat. Whichever seat you like. Yeah, you can take the same as well if you want to. Sit here. Not yet. First of all, I'd like to start out with Marijtje Jongsma for a second. I noticed you got quite annoyed at the discussions we saw before here on the sofas. You thought these were two people a bit removed from the actual practice of research in a lab or in a university, is that correct?
Well, not really removed. I mean, I have great respect both for Josse Engelen, of course, and Sijbel Noorda. They're very well respected in the field. However, they are at the end of a very successful career. And of course, not having open access, that seems to be the biggest problem, not being able to access your journals after you retire. I think if you talk about younger scientists, also the ones with temporary contracts, they have huge difficulty, A, with the large competition, and B, with quickly changing, how do you say it, changing demands from their supervisors with respect to publishing. I mean, it started off initially, it tried to publish as highly as possible on the citation index, work on your age index. Now that's rapidly changing. We've seen the SEP. Now it's you have to do this, you have to publish in open access, you have to share your data. And this is all to a very insecure group where we know that 90% will not survive in academia. In a highly competitive system.
So not survive in the sense they won't find a follow-up to their...
There will not be a follow-up job, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's off your chest, so to speak.
Thank you.
Okay. We asked you both to take a stand on some subject, and I'd like to start out with Marijtje Jongsma. We have a. Can we?
Well, this is probably some Pavlov-like reflex. There's a small
Can we have the first slide, please?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, Marijtje, go on.
As always, as a researcher, if you're asked to introduce something, you're making slides. First of all, I really like the organization, and by starting out, I shouldn't be here. The one that was initially invited is a very good colleague and friend, Martijn Arns. He was invited because he wrote a column in Nature in November. Actually, it was an initiative with a couple of colleagues, and that became very rapidly the most read column in a short time, or one of the top 20, I think. Unfortunately, the title wasn't picked by Martijn. It was later on picked by Nature, and it sort of framed open access, which was never our intention. So better it would be that the increase in publications is tiring out the peer review system. So what happened? We had a meeting just before summer. Martijn and I are supervising one of our PhD students together, and we had just received the latest peer review reports on the manuscript. And we were completely appalled. I mean, we probably all know this frustration with peer review reports. I mean, you feel not well understood, and it is hard to receive criticism, but this time it was different, at least we felt. When we read the peer reviews, it was quite clear that they even hadn't read the manuscript properly. There were compliments about aspects of the research that weren't there, for example, and some remarks that didn't seem to refer to the work that we did. So Martijn decided to look into this, and he stumbled upon quite some problems with the peer review system, and especially the pressure on the peer review system. And some other examples from colleagues started to add up. Some reviews appear to be completely bold and even impolite in their tone of voice. Sometimes the English is really bad. And it seems to be slipping more and more. And I think the peer review system is the most acknowledged and most important system of protecting the quality of our research output and research communication. So what happens with publications? Publications double about every 9 to 13 years. So this is big business. This is not as quickly as, for example, in Moore's law for transistors on chips that doubles about every 2 years, but still every 9 to 13 years. You know, if you start a publishing company today, your profits will double in another 10 years. That will be nice. The problem is, and this is a paper from 2007 from Miho and Yang, that about half of these papers is never read, or that's their estimate, and 90% is never cited. So are we talking about research communication here, or are we talking about something very different? Why do we publish? Sometimes you say publish or perish. I think we publish pretty much to publish. I mean, we're a business model. It's our output, it's how we make a career. I want it on my CV. I definitely want a Nature paper on my CV. And I want at least a lot of papers on my CV. So worldwide it's difficult. People say, of course, there's also a lot more researchers than there were 10 years ago. But it's very difficult to get a hold on the hard data. What happens if you look at the Netherlands? It's quite easy to find the exact numbers of articles produced in the Netherlands. There's a very good record of VSNU that collects all the information of all the Dutch universities. So we can see that as a closed system. Let's call it a test tube for publication culture in the Netherlands. And we see that the amount of papers has not exactly doubled, but increased 70% since 2000. But if we look at the researchers, and this is the researchers with a PhD, so the ones that would qualify to provide a peer review, we can see that these are actually decreasing in the Netherlands. So we do have a lot of PhD students, but not a whole lot of researchers at the university. If you add that up, then the peer review pressure has increased or has become about 4 or 5 times as high as it was 15 years ago. This is also because one extra article does ask for about 3 or 4 peer reviewers. Some papers get rejected. You need at least 2 or 3 peer reviewers to have a look at the manuscript. So this pressure is building up a lot, and there's not really good incentives for peer reviews. So what I start to notice, especially from younger scientists, is that if they're asked to provide a peer review, hell no. Why would I do that? I mean, there's some moral, I mean, that you're obliged with respect to your discipline to provide a good peer review. But if you're starting and you have a lot of work pressure, I would like to spend my time on writing grant applications and producing my own papers. And there is no real incentive of providing a peer review. Then there was another shocking paper by John Bohannon from Science, and he wrote a spoof paper. He sent it off to 255 magazines. Probably a lot of people know this paper. A lot of them got accepted after none or just very superficial peer review. So that is a real worry. How do we keep this system in balance? And a lot of people have proposed maybe we should reward the peer review system. But I would like to say maybe we should start to wonder why we publish and publish so much. Because it's obviously not communicating our research finding. It's way beyond that. It's just building CVs. It's trying to get grant money. It's just, you know, writing publons. Publons is the smallest unity you need to write a paper about, especially with our PhDs. There's a lot of universities that have this general idea that a PhD should have 4 papers in order to get their thesis and their PhD degree. So the first thing you do after 6 months when the first results are out, can we publish this, can we publish this? And you write tiny publications, open access or not. That's fine. So nowadays, if you think about scientific integrity and cases of fraud, we think of the big fraud cases, yeah, of scientists that make up data or whatever. But what is starting to appear is fraud in peer review. And only 2 weeks ago, I got a warning actually from my own field of research that there's 4 related journals. This is conventional journals with impacts over 2, where the editors know each other and they publish a lot in each other journals, and these manuscripts are all accepted within 1 or 2 days after submission, so obviously without proper peer review. So the whole system seems to become perverted in a way. So if we look at science and we think about what do we want to share, what do we want to give back to society, what is the product of research, and it has been mentioned before, I would support the idea of Science 2.0, that is really trying to go back to the basics. What do we want researchers to do? And what do we want them to produce for society? Is that just publications? Is that sharing data? Or is this probably good education? I don't know. Maybe documentaries, that could be a nice one, or other ways. Governance. So I think I'll leave it to that, and I'm hoping for some discussion here.
Okay, thank you. Actually, what you're saying is open access is not the problem.
No,
there's a bigger problem in front of us before we get to the open access issues. Is that correct?
I think it's the publication pressure that is going berserk.
Would you say, turning it around, that all this talk about open access, new rules on publishing, etc., is causing more confusion?
In a way, it's causing more confusion. If you want to interpret it in a negative way, you would say it will open up even better ways to increase the publication pressure, because it becomes easier to publish more papers, also from a technical point of view.
You mean in open access it's easier to publish more papers? Why would that be?
I mean the techniques behind it. It's easier to put it on a digital internet site than go through the whole printing process.
Peer review or not? Peer
review or not, and digital or not, yeah.
Yes. Who agrees that on the work floor, open access is actually a lesser problem or a lesser subject than, let's say, publishing as much as possible? Okay, that's only one. I'll give you the mic. Don't worry. Okay. Yes. You're not the only one, I assure you. You're the only one holding up your hand. The point being, on the work floor, what exactly is the problem of science at the moment? Is that open access or not? What do you think?
Well, that's quite a question.
Yes.
What is the problem of science? But I raised my hand primarily because I recognized a lot from what was said.
Right.
And with my personal experience trying to publish open access, it was 2 years ago before there were new agreements with publishers. I spent about a week trying to arrange to get my paper published open access, and I had to swim upwards in the stream for people who said, well, that's not on our agenda primarily. If you want to, for moral reasons, then I guess we'll support you, but you have to go up to the central financial desk to get approval for this, and we don't support you because it's not in our interest, in a sense. So that's what I recognize, and that's why I raised my hand. I wanted to publish open access for sort of...
For principal reasons.
Principal reasons, and I found it to be not a priority anywhere in the organization. It was another university than this one, by the way, but...
we don't mention names, but to compare it with non-open access papers, you've tried
Well, the other thing I totally recognized was the peer review process. I was more or less told not to spend so much time on writing reviews, where I found it to be, again, having a PhD in a very specialized subject. If the papers on that subject land on my desk, I find it my responsibility to write a good review, because I know there's not a lot of other people who have this knowledge. So I did this, but then again, I also have to say I'm one of these people who is struggling to survive at the university.
Yes.
Maybe for my principles, I guess, but fortunately, there's another short-term future ahead of me. But it doesn't help me to push this open access and to spend serious time on writing reviews.
Okay, but this took you more than a week to get it prepared for the open access publishing, like you said. Was it accepted, by the way?
It was accepted in the beginning, and it was a journal that offered the opportunity to...
Right.
So it was your choice, but it cost money, like 3,000 euros.
Yes.
And it cost me a week, so maybe you can do the math and try to see...
Sure. But the point is, if that wouldn't be a week, but let's say press a button, like some of the people have said today, would it be preferable to go to open access for your publications? I mean, if it wouldn't take a week to arrange it.
For me, it would.
Yeah.
It would probably be preferable, but I also have to say that I think this was an instance of a paper that was, let's say, purely theoretical. So there was no problems with data that come from external finance partners that have stakes, and I guess, that's another part of the picture, or changing scientific landscape, that there's more external and commercial partners involved, and data is money nowadays, and so that's another hurdle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other reactions to Marijtje's? Yes, please.
Thank you. I thought you brought up some really good points. I also agree that the quality of peer review has been going down, and also that the drive to publish is possibly too high. But I don't know if I quite am understanding you or agree with you when you say that we should not publish so much, because as a person in the lab every day, any quality science is useful to me, because if I'm going to plan out some experiments for the next week or month or 5 months, I need to know what hasn't worked and the wide variety of ways that people have tried, and maybe find the one that seems to be the most reproducible. So even the most incremental, maybe mundane stuff to me is useful. So I wonder if there's any solutions to solving the overwhelming of the peer reviewers, and also continue to just publish as much quality stuff as gets produced. So I wonder if you have any comments on that.
Well, I think the code word is quality here, but also communication. Of course, communication is vital in research, but somehow only the international peer-reviewed journals are accepted at the moment as research communication. Those are the only ones that you can put on your CV and track record, and will determine your position at the research institute, and if you're eligible to obtain grant money. And of course, if you have, for example, null results, very important. Skills are very important, but it seems to go wrong that they're only looking at the article. I mean, even if it's a tiny part of a complete research project, they still prefer to publish that before the whole project is being finished. And I doubt if that is a good way to go. I think we should be more focused on the quality and less on the quantity. However, it's easier to keep track on quantity. That's why it's quite popular.
Okay, a final point, and then we go to Anthonie. Is there a solution? I mean, this is what the problem is. But what would, in your mind, be a solution? And who should provide it?
I think that's a really good one, and I think there are some first steps being made. And one good example is that in the latest standard evaluation protocol, now the publication criteria has been lessened.
At the university level, that is.
Yeah. So that's the first step. And I do believe that, another very popular term is science in transition, that we should not try to be very revolutionary about this and start to shout things. I mean, I think trying to force open access in a very short time is very confusing and very stressful for a lot of people, especially if it's conflicting demands from directors. But yes, I mean, if we can see possibilities for improvement, go for it. And I think this problem is starting to become more and more acknowledged, and steps are being made to try to change the system towards open science, for example.
Yes. Okay, thank you for this for now. I'd like to change to Anthonie Meijers, a philosopher on the couch.
Yes.
We asked you for a thesis as well, and you had quite an interesting thing, I thought. And it boils down to universities beginning their own open access journals. So please explain why that would be important.
Should I talk through the microphone? You
it's
want
all
me
right.
to do that?
No, it's all right.
It's all right, okay. Well, let me start with two examples. I'm editor of Philosophical Explorations. That's a hybrid journal, so it has subscriptions, but you also can buy open access articles as an author. It's published by Routledge, which is part of Taylor and Francis, which is quite a large publishing house.
Now, I think they're here, isn't it?
No,
No?
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
well, hello. Now, I give you two examples where we, as editorial board, really had trouble with publishers. One had to do with publishing books, the other one with publishing journals. Now, 2 years ago, we started a discussion with our publisher about having more special issues per year. So the journal now has one special issue per year. Since everything is now electronic, why not have more special issues if there are very good proposals? Now, so not just for the purpose of having more, but because there are interesting proposals. And we wanted to accommodate that and have quick response rates so that people with interesting stuff can publish very soon. Now, for bureaucratic reasons, they couldn't do this. So they said, well, we have to budget every single article. There is a little bit editorial work involved. So we cannot do that. Here you see a company who throws away all the advantages of electronic publishing. And they actually said to us, well, we could have open access special issues. But then every author had to pay the article processing cost, which is, in our case, 2,150 euros. A special issue is 10 papers, so it's 21,500 euros per special issue. That is a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, at NWO, if you submit a research program, the maximum that you can claim is 5,000 euros per research program that you submit. So it's the order of magnitude is just wrong. I did a counter proposal to them, and they said, well, it should be roughly 5,000 euros per special issue, or even less, and that didn't respond. The other example that I have, and that is something that I think that we should also be aware of, is what you transfer to a journal. So if you submit a paper and your paper is accepted, what you transfer is the copyrights for eternity in all languages, in all media, even media that do not yet exist. So
that's a literal test.
That's a literal test. I mean, I'm not making up this. That is what you transfer. Now, I was the editor at a very large volume, a handbook at Elsevier. And it was huge, I mean, more than 50 authors. And one of the authors refuted to sign that copyright form because he said, well, I'm only willing to transfer copyright for this particular publication, namely this handbook. Now, that objection reached the legal department of Elsevier, currently in New York, and they stopped the printing process. The book was being printed at that moment. They stopped the printing process until agreement was reached about the transfer of copyrights. It was completely ridiculous, I think. Now, these examples motivated me, and I will give you some of my some argumentation why I think this is a good thesis. I think when it comes to publishing, you have to realize a couple of things. There are only a very few number of very large publishing houses. I mean, recently Springer and Macmillan merged. That's another huge, second largest publishing house. So there are very few, and they have a monopoly. And why do they have a monopoly? Not only because there are so few, but also because publishing is reputation-based. So a journal has a particular reputation based on the editorial boards, the editor, the authors that have published before. If you publish in a journal in which Einstein published before, it sort of carries over to you when you publish in that same journal, at least in the perception of some.
Annalen der Physik.
For example, yes. So it's a reputation-based thing, and price doesn't play any role. So if you submit a paper to a journal, you're not thinking, well, what should my library, what has my library to pay if I publish here? Or it doesn't matter at all. So it's not a free market. It's a market of very few companies, monopolies, and it's not about tradable goods. It's about reputations, and price doesn't play a role. This market of monopolies has led to enormous profits, really enormous. The margins in profits, I think Seibold Noda already mentioned that, is between 30 and 40%. That means that large publishing houses make more than €1 billion profit per year. And who's paying this? Those are our libraries. The subscription rates for journals has substantially been higher than the inflation rate for a long series of years. And I think that's really a problem for our libraries. It has also led to companies, monopolies, who do not innovate much. So the example which I gave of having more special issues, being flexible, etc., making use of new technologies, that is not something they are looking for. They are looking at consolidating their power position in the market. Now, open access, and that is a claim that I make, is primarily a matter of money. It's not a matter of access. So it's a matter of asking a reasonable price for the distribution of information. And in Western Europe, I think it's not a matter of open access. An alumnus of this university can buy a library card for €13.50 and has access to all the information that the library has information of. So I don't think that this small company, SME in Veldhoven or whatever, not connected to the university library, really has a problem here. Just buy a library card and it's fixed. The real problem is that we just pay much too high prices for the distribution of information that publishing houses give us. Now, as we all know, monopolies do not listen to reason, they only listen to power. So I think what we should do is counter their powerful positions by creating consortia ourselves. And though I really I'm in favor of what is being done in the VSNU at the moment by negotiating new terms of contracts, I think it would be even more effective if the Dutch universities match and negotiate together with German or Danish or British universities and make an even more powerful bloc. So a European strategy is better than a Dutch strategy, and that also applies to, I think, the science foundations. And that's another thing that I would like to ask your attention for. Most of the work is being done by people employed by the universities. Editorial boards, referees. Referees are the capital of a journal. We need to be very careful with them. Now, if most of the work is being done by ourselves, why not move from those large companies to universities? We can do it easily ourselves, I believe. The only thing you need is manuscript handling software, you need an editorial board, you need referees, you need a website, and you need some administrative support. Now, I think editors and editorial boards can be a great asset in breaking up those monopolies, and we should really look into this. The University of Nijmegen the library of the University of Nijmegen, what they did is the following. They grouped together a number of journals in linguistics and tried to win them over to start publishing open access with the support of that library. And given that it was not just a single journal, but a group of journals that had a strong position in the field, they were able to do that. And that is a strategy I think we should think about more. So, should we then step down as editors and editorial boards advocated by some in the Volkskrant, your own journal? Well, we can only do that as part of a coordinated action, otherwise we will simply be replaced. And I think if we do that, we need support by the universities for basic administrative support, but also to get those who are seen as our top researchers behind this very initiative. Hence my thesis, universities should start open access journals themselves and should motivate the top researchers to be the figureheads of these journals. Thank you.
Okay, that's a clear message, isn't it? Thought so, yes. In a way, it's inventing publishing all over again without the profits. Is that
yes.
a summary of what you said?
Yeah, that's a good summary. Yes.
Yes.
And not just inventing, because most of the work we do ourselves, but transferring publishing from a commercial setting to a non-profit setting.
Yes. Would you be in favor of
And that is not a game and not an aim in itself. It's part of a strategy of breaking up a monopoly. I'm not against publishers. I'm in favor of reasonable prices.
Okay, that's a clear message. Does this concern the average scientific worker in the field, so to speak?
Well, I would be in favor of such a model if it was not a commercial.
Take the mic, please.
It's not a commercial model. However, my biggest fear would be how this would affect researchers in an international setting. And it is, I mean, if I look at my own university and I publish in my university magazine, is it being acknowledged internationally?
Yes.
But apart from that, I'm all in favor from getting it away from a commercial setting towards a public setting, even, you know, if it would be in a European context or something.
Yeah.
So how about this international dimension? Like you said, power can come from other countries as well.
Yes, but I mean, how well a journalist is regarded very much depends on the editorial board, the editor, their reputation. And if you get high-profile researchers behind such an initiative, if you start publishing very, very good articles, then I think you can build up a reputation within 5 years.
Okay. Any questions or remarks on this point? Yes. Mike, please. Just a second. Hold the question.
I'd like to respond to this idea of starting your open access journals yourself, because I think in the past most of the journals were published by learned societies. And these learned societies were ruled by scientists.
Yes.
And why is it that they handed over their copyrights all to the publishers? Because what you suggest is, in fact, start new learned societies.
Yeah. So I can give an example of my own journal. So we were also a journal of a learned society. At some point, we had losses, and we couldn't make the transfer to the new technological environment. Right, because that was very expensive those days. Now it's for nothing, basically, and we couldn't make that transition. And that was a moment in which we were an easy target for journals to be taken over. That's basically what happened. But I think now for learned societies, again, I think it would be a very good idea to start journals themselves. The American Philosophical Association actually just started a new journal, and that's an example of such a journal.
Can I have the mic at Jos Engelen for a second? I was wondering, you have all kinds of arrangements and pilot programs for making open access publications possible for individual researchers, for authors, so to speak. Would this initiative of putting forward new open access journals be something NWO could support as well?
In fact, we already have support
Really?
in this.
Tell us.
That was part of the initial initiatives that NWO took to get this moving. And then, indeed, if either journals were ready to make the transition and there were transition costs involved, or if journals wanted to start, like you did many years ago with your journal, there was support for that.
Okay, so NWO is on your side.
Great to hear.
Okay.
No, the implementations are very, very. I'm very, very sympathetic to the idea. Let me leave it
Okay,
at that.
but in practice, it's quite hard to get some.
And learned societies, they know about money too. Science is published by a learned society.
Yeah. That's true also. Yes, Daniel Lakens?
So I think just one thing why we, so you said we were easy targets during this electronic switch. I think we're still easy targets, as I understand it from science publishers. We are really, really extremely stupid when it comes to publishing, and we give so much money away. I mean, typically, if you want to save money, you can just walk up to your publisher and say, hey, we don't want to do this anymore, we don't have the money, and then you get 50% discount or something. We never do that, okay. But I wondered just very practically, because I never thought of this just switch. Can you very practically, let's say that you convince 3 existing journals with their existing names and everything, and the editorial boards to pick up their stuff, leave the...
No, you can't.
Because what are exactly the problems?
Yeah, there are legal problems. So, for example, the name of the journal is owned by the publishing house.
So then you call it 2.0 or something?
Yeah, but there's some very funny changes. I mean, I don't recall actually, but people translated the name into Latin, for example, and had the same journal. And I think there are also some barriers here that you have to redefine a little bit the scope of the journal. Otherwise, it will be seen as a sort of copy, and you have to prevent that.
Because
but the Nijmegen example is, I think, an example of where it went well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I never heard of it, but it sounds like a great idea. So you can combine maybe 2 journals and create a slightly broader one and make it open access with exactly the same team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. Well, we've heard some practical examples of the actual problem being publish or perish, in a sense, is more important than open access problems. We've heard a proposal to go our own way, so to speak. I thank you for explaining these issues. Thank you so much.